single? Let's just get that right out of the way.
This columnist that I really enjoy said something years ago to the effect that, being single is kind of like being in the bathroom. It's the most natural thing in the world until you've been in there just a little bit too long and everyone starts wondering what's wrong with you. So, there is a certain, stigma associated with being single, I think. And so that, can definitely be a challenge.
Mm-hmm. How so in the church?
Well, honestly, I don't, having been single now for, I'm trying to do the math, about a dozen years after a marriage of a little over 10 years. It's what I notice now and what I noticed, when I was initially single again, it's not the same thing. And I think, to be honest, I think some of the stigma may have been, as much in my own head as it was about what other people were actually thinking about me, right? And so I think specifically within the church, obviously there's an emphasis on family, right? And sort of, being that married with the kids is kind of seen as the norm. And so when you're outside of that, I wouldn't say that specifically within the church I've had anything that was really negative or that anybody has, done anything judgmental directly. But I think there is that sense that you don't quite fit in.
Right. Hannah, being single in the church, what's the worst part about that?
Like Shane was saying, there is a bit of a stigma there with singleness, but specifically I would say it's sometimes hard to go to a church, especially as full of family life as ours, and walk in by yourself. There is that kind of loneliness, I guess, associated with it, because it is not expected, but you see so much of it, like a relationship and married life, it's this prize to be attained. So sometimes on the flip side of that singleness, it kind of leaves you feeling like like Shane was saying, you don't quite fit, and there's always a little bit. Prize. And you didn't win the prize. Yeah, exactly.
So you walk around, I didn't win the prize.
Yeah, and it's just something that's a little makes you feel put off a little bit sometimes, I think.
Or this wasn't a situation where we're being thrown together for anything. Don't you find unnatural pairings?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's like how casual can I be while I try and set you up with my friend over here who also happens to be single? It's one of those things, but with all well-intentioned, always well-intentioned. But you do see it, and people, again, it comes back to this is something that you're supposed to want eventually. So why not get it now?
That's right. What about you, PJ?
Mine sounds really superficial, because it's probably those really friendly elderly church ladies. They're like, hey, where's your wife? And I say, oh no. I don't want to tell them, because it's very often the very same thing where it's like, well, hey, there's this and this person, there's this and this. So for me, that's probably in church, the hardest thing is trying to not become somebody's matchmaking project, as bad as that sounds. But outside of the church, though, it seems like a married person almost carries more spiritual weight when it comes to authority. If somebody's asking advice, or somebody's you're trying to help somebody out.
Well, that's interesting. It's they're more well-rounded than you
are.
are.
They must know something or have it together enough to be able to talk into a situation. But I don't know. That's probably the biggest part for me. Is that makes it a little bit harder to next time be like, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyways.
Good for you. I like that. I find the only time I've ever felt single in my whole life is when I hang out with single people. When I'm with at work, and I'm just with other people, if I'm with other families, if I'm with my own family, it never even crosses my mind that I'm single until I'm with single people. And then it seems like there's a spotlight, and that's what it's about, and the awkwardness sets in, and you become a different person. So, and I find that, especially like you say, Hannah, in the church, that there's such an emphasis on family, and that's supposed to be the goal to be attained, and we just haven't done that. And what's the matter, right? What's the
Oh, yeah.
matter
Like,
is always
yeah.
hanging over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Why haven't you been there yet?
Yeah.
Or why aren't you there yet?
What went wrong? All right, so let's flip it then and talk about what's the best part. Shane.
Well, as was mentioned, like the idea of service. I find, frankly, having a wide open schedule most of the time, there's nobody waiting for me at home, that it really allows me the freedom to serve in ways that I know I wouldn't have been able to, or that I wasn't able to when I was in a relationship. And I think that's the number one thing. In the line of work that I'm in, I work with a lot of people that have mental health issues, that have a lot of problems going on in their life, frankly, where if I get some guy calls me at 7:00 in the evening and needs to talk it out for a couple hours, well, I can do that.
All right, you don't have to worry about waking
Right.
somebody else up, eh?
Yeah, I don't need to worry about, okay, I'm neglecting
Yeah.
my relationship here, or, and I mean, that's just one example, but yeah, I mean, just that openness to be able to take on things and not feel as though I'm taking away from something else, if that makes sense.
So you can say yes.
I can say yes, yeah. I rarely have to say no.
The freedom to say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge and never to be underestimated. PJ, what's the best part about being single in the church?
I very much would have to be the exact same thing there. It takes away some of the things that I would have to consider otherwise, right? There's less people involved in a choice. I don't have to see if what does this line up with somebody else's schedule? What is this? What do we? Now I can just be okay, I know what I have up. I can do this. I'm not taking away from a different commitment or something like that, or putting this in front of somebody else. I can just actually be I would like to do this.
So the freedom to commit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there's also that terror that comes along with that, where it's oh man, I don't have any good excuse to say no.
No out.
Yeah, there's no out. That's a pretty terrifying part of it as well. But that the option is there. But it is fantastic to be able to have that freedom, to be able to if a missions trip comes up, to be able to just kind of uproot your life and get out of here. And
so along with the freedom to say yes and the freedom to commit to something, I think we're talking about the freedom to make your own boundaries, right? Where you decide how far you go, where you go, with who you go, if you go. You make all those decisions yourself without having to weigh it out with somebody else, or being held back by somebody else that doesn't want to do the same things you do, doesn't want to experience the same things. You're free to set your own boundaries, and that is a beautiful and precious thing, I think, right? What about you, Hannah? It's the best thing.
It's such a unique time to be able to just pursue the desires and the passions that the Lord's put on your heart. What are you passionate about? Find out what that is, and learn and grow, and just really become comfortable with who you are, and how you can grow. In times of singleness, it's a really great time to be okay, what are things in my heart that I know I need to work on before I would even be ready for a relationship? And it's just a time of preparation, I guess. There's the freedom of it, but it's also just a great time to really get to know yourself, both the flaws and the good things, so that you know what it is you're looking for, but also what you need as a person.
I think it's fantastic. You just segued into the next question that we were going to talk about, because we're going to mention the gift of singleness. The Bible talks about the gift of singleness. And so to see it as a gift, you have to look at some of these positive things. And when we use words like freedom and free to commit and free to make your own boundaries, you're also free to work on yourself without the distraction of commitments in relationship and family and all the time that takes, because when you do win the prize, it's going to take a lot of time and effort and attention. And that's why Paul calls it that said that he wished that everybody would be single because it is a gift of time. And so how we use our time when we're single is extremely important. What's the best thing you've done with your time since you've been single, Shane?
Wow. Okay. The best thing that I've done with my time. I don't know if I could think of one specific thing. And I don't want to be too repetitive, but I mean, it does kind of come back to that service thing. And to build, I guess, a bit on what Hannah was saying too, I think, if when I was your age, I was thinking like that, I would probably have had a much easier time. But I really think that to work on yourself has been a big thing. I mean, to serve others and to work on myself, I guess. Because there are absolutely things that, I needed to change about who I was that, didn't come into focus until I'd been on my own again for a little while. And that time for introspection and,
dare we say healing?
That would be a good word. Healing and also the time to, if I think back, just times of like reading my Bible, praying, whatever. I mean, that all looks a whole lot better now that I'm on my own and have kind of realized without the distraction of, anything else. I mean, you go home to an empty house, you can only watch so many YouTube videos, and you start to realize, really doing some introspection and realizing things that you need to work on. I mean, that has been, I'm certainly not all the way there yet, but I do feel that I've, my relationship with others, my relationship with God, my relationship with myself, frankly, all of these things I think are better now after that time of introspection, I guess, that was.
So it sounds like you've
allowed.
used your time well.
I've tried to. Now, the first couple of years after being divorced, didn't use them so well. But, over time, I feel that, in terms of my own peace of mind, I'm in a better place now than I've ever been in my life.
Good for you, Shane.
So, so that has been a valuable thing for me. I mean, I'm appreciative of it.
Awesome. PJ, what's the best thing you've done with your time being single?
As much I want to say, like, missions trips has been one of the best things, and it's been amazing, but I think it would be the time kind of spent alone, right? Where like after work, or even a little bit of time before work, where I get to just be alone and read my Bible and have like no distractions, right? Just get alone. And it's I don't know, it's been more growth than any outreach that I've ever done in the last 2 years, anything like that. Just to be just alone with God and just reading and learning, and like you said, getting to figure out a little bit about who you are yourself. And just in those moments, it's been probably, I would say that's probably been the best time that I've spent in the last couple of years.
Right.
Is just to take the time to get alone with God and to, figure out who He says He is.
Yeah.
And
that's fantastic.
Like
I think that He blesses us when we are intentional about our relationship with Him. And being single, you have the time and the space. And so when we choose to use our time and our space for Him, I think that we tap into some big blessings because of that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Hannah?
I think one big thing would be intentionally building community with other believers to really encourage each other in our walk together, specifically in seasons of singleness, that we can grow from each other. I think that would be a big one. And I just kind of always come back to the idea of, the command to love the Lord with our heart, mind, and soul. It didn't specify a season. Like it was all in all seasons.
That's right.
And all looks different in every season. All looks different when you're single, and it looks different when you're married and when you have a family. But I think singleness is a really unique time to use, to really learn what it means to love Him with all and with everything you have. So I think it's just really been a the best thing for me has just been diving into that and like, what does it mean? How can I love him in every area of my life? And how can I do that in community with other believers?
What would you say to encourage other people who are single but not wanting to be single? Shane.
I'm going back to Hannah's comment there about, working on yourself first. I do really think, and I know it's cliche, but the idea that, well, you've got to be okay being alone before you can really be in a healthy relationship. And I know this probably isn't what anybody wants to hear, I guess, but I guess my response would be, if you're not okay being single, then that's what you need to work on right now.
Right.
Probably not finding them. That would be my recommendation.
Yep.
Anyway.
I think that sounds wise.
So I guess that, I'll leave it at that.
What about you, PJ? What would you recommend to your single buddies who don't want to be single?
Find somebody else to talk to. I don't know. No, it probably sound along the same lines as Shane was saying. Like, I don't know. It never has seemed like a healthy idea for somebody to get into a relationship because they're not okay without a relationship.
Right.
Like it just, I don't know, seems
It's a red
super
flag,
unhealthy.
right?
Yeah, it does.
Would you say it's fair that to let people know that a person can't fill that void that you think that a person should fill?
I think that would be definitely something to broach with them.
Yeah.
Because
I'm at that super fun age right now where like all of my friends are getting married. Like, all the weddings.
They're all winning the prize.
All the weddings. It's super great. And I think it's totally just about perspective. Like I can go to my friends' weddings and I can go there and I can choose to sit there and be like, oh, this is the worst. I'm here by myself. I'm here alone. I wish I had that. And just kind of sit in that where I can go there and choose to celebrate them and choose to celebrate what they have and just continue just pray that I'm ready when it comes, and just the preparation thing, I guess, comes back to. So just like, I think it's all about perspective in that of like, if we're going to look at it, singleness as a negative thing, it's going to feel like a negative thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of celebrating it. Yeah. So Jesus was single. So what about him being single applies to your life? Like what encouragement do you get from him? What did he do that you emulate?
if anything, it'd probably be the fact of knowing that he was tempted in every single same way that I have ever been tempted, right? And he was fine. Like he made it through, and just knowing that that's on my side in this as well that'd probably be one of the biggest encouragements, is knowing that no matter what I'm coming up against, like he went through that and more, and he can resonate with it. Like, so anything I'm struggling with, I can just bring to him, and he knows what's going on.
Right. So just knowing that he got it done.
Yeah.
Is a marker for you to reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Hannah?
I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit already, but like it's that single minded like focus and mission you see lived out through his life. Like, as if he's our model and our example to follow, he was single-minded in his service and in the way he lived. But then also like drawing didn't disqualify him because he was single. Like I think sometimes we disqualify ourselves before we even try because of different things in all seasons of life, but like it didn't discount or take away anything from his ministry or what he was doing or his mission because he was single. Like it's not something that was ever you cannot because you're alone. You know, it was always this is the way he was living, and he's our perfect example, right?
First and foremost, I think it just shows us that's a perfectly okay way to live, right? Being single is perfectly okay. If, as you said, if Jesus is the role model that we're supposed to be following in all areas, then, I have no problem with my situation. But yeah, the single-mindedness, and I guess this is what Paul writes about when he talks about being single too. Being a single focus, single purpose. I mean, within the context of a relationship, you may be with somebody that, your focus is very similar, but it's never going to be 100%. And so, to do the things that Jesus did, it's tough to imagine him doing that, being single. I mean, even thinking about the other, the disciples. Well, when they started following him, they left their families, right? And so it seems to be that there, is an advantage to that single-minded purpose that is sort of demonstrated through Jesus. And I mean, I guess through Paul too. And, we have other examples.
Right. Unless he was actually in teaching mode with them, he seemed to make more traction. He seemed to get more done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with him,
unfettered.
oh, sorry, that was awkward. And like with him, I was just gonna say, with him as our example too, like what we saw, because, he was a single guy, is what did he use what did he do with his time? Like he built like deep intimacy with the Father. Like that was his priority and his focus. Like we talked about, he was single-minded in his mission, but you mentioned it too, the disciples, like they left their families, like they used that time and that season, like build deep intimacy with the Father. We see that through the life of Jesus. So I think that's something for us as singles, like that's something we should be doing as well.
Right.
We should be taking our time to build that and really like get to know his heart, right?
Mm-hmm. I personally like the idea of how many times Jesus pulled away from the crowd and went to be by himself. So even being single, still sought solitary time, still sought solitude. So you can be with people and still need to be away from people. So that, if you flip that on its edge, being with people doesn't fill you either. Right? So somebody that's looking for a relationship and thinking that somebody is going to fill that void in them is looking in the wrong place, because people don't fill. You can be in a room full of people and still feel very lonely.
Yep.
You can actually, from personal experience, be with the wrong person and be the most lonely, because you know that it's supposed to be different. So when you withdraw and you spend time with the Father and he fills that, that's when you come back and you can take on anything. And then you can go and do whatever Jesus did, and you can overcome temptation and you can conquer a lot of things because you had that time alone and fill that void with what it should be filled with.
Yeah. And just what you're talking about with filling that void, like I think for a lot of people, the idea of singleness is like it's like a void that needs to be filled, and it's an identity piece of them almost. Like that's what I will be complete when I am not alone. But back to like being by yourself, it's that unique opportunity to kind of, we talked about it earlier, getting to know who you are, but also like learning your identity is who you are as a child of God, and who you are as part of the church body, and who you are as part of your family. Like just really getting really rooted in that identity, so that it's not a desperate thing,
right?
And it's not I need someone to be complete. I am, I'm whole now. I'm whole as I am because of him, right?
Right.
It's not I'm looking for someone else to fill that void, because that's where things get slippery.
Well, you place a lot of pressure on another human being that they can't fulfill. You're not going to fill somebody else's void. And so somebody isn't going to fill yours. It's just not right to expect that from people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that when we come out of our homes that we were raised in, we all come out damaged because damaged people raised us. And that's not saying anything negative about our parents or our families. It's just saying nobody's perfect, and all the flaws and the problems and the issues that went on in the home, we leave the home with. And so if we think that we're going to have all that fixed and all that filled and all that healed by finding a relationship and then it's going to all be good, we're wrong, because that's been thought of since Adam and Eve. And it never has yet worked, because we're all imperfect and we're all damaged people raising damaged children who grow up to raise damaged children, and the same. And so it's so important that we realize that and cut that that seeking, that desperate thing that we're looking for in somebody else. Cut that off and stop expecting people to make it all good for us.
Getting okay with being single, but not shutting yourself off
That's
from
right.
finding a person.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so then we need to talk about if I was excited about Jesus pulling away and spending time with the Father, but then there comes time in our walk as well where we need to intentionally plug in with other believers so that we can get that community and that fellowship that is also a need. It doesn't fill a void, but it's a need for us to build something together. So how, in your own personal life, do you intentionally connect with the body so that you can be part of what God is doing?
I mean, for myself personally, being involved with the worship teams has been a really great thing for me. Just as a sense of community. Because, yeah, I mean, as I said, like, I'm okay being single at this point, but that doesn't mean there isn't loneliness sometimes, right? And so that's been one connection for me that's been really good. And I guess another thing has simply been to have, I've got like one or two guys that I, really trust, that I have a very close relationship with, that, that I can talk to when I'm, if I'm struggling or not feeling the best about my situation. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm really responding directly to the question exactly, but really, I think another element that's been very important is learning that, I have control about what I'm choosing to think about or where I'm choosing to have my focus. And that's something that is one of those very simple to say, but not terribly easy to do. But I really have come to learn and believe that we do have that choice of where we focus our attention. And sometimes it's simply a matter of saying, you know what, I'm not thinking about this anymore right now. Again, it's not always an easy thing to do, but I mean, it's possible, and and it's probably been one of the most important, one of the most important things probably I think I've learned in my life is that the mind, well, to quote, I don't know where this quote originated, but they say, the mind is an excellent servant but a terrible master. And I've found, when have had issues with being single, or when I'm not in a good place, that's I've got to remember, okay, this isn't the boss.
Right.
I can take some control over what I'm thinking.
On your part. What about you, PJ? What do you do to be intentionally to plug in?
While not being overly social, I'll try to just find things that are done in small groups, but again, intentional is a great word, to make sure I'm paying attention to who I allow speak into my life.
Good for you.
So then it's choosing a few people, just a few, like you were saying, you have a couple of guys that you were close to. And I think that's really important, to have a few people that you trust and that what they believe, and that lines up with what you believe, to allow them to speak into your life, get to know them, let them get to know you. Like it's been community and fellowship has been one of the probably most important parts about actually getting okay with where I am, right? To talk to other people about what I'm thinking about, what I'm going through, and just being honest and open and listening to sound advice from these people that I know care. And yeah, it's just that super intentional thing. Be intentional about finding intentional people.
What about you, Hannah? What do you do to intentionally plug into the body?
And I think it's important to find people as well who are familiar with the season they're in, but also like have wisdom to speak into it. You know, like if there's nothing wrong with me hanging out with a couple other girls that are my age, that's great, and we can all connect that way. But I think there's value in, you know, also being with people who are a little older, who are also, you know, if we're talking specifically about singleness in that season, who have wisdom to offer, who have, you know, been there for a while, or, you know, have lived a lot longer than I have. There's something to be said about that. Just to kind of hop on the wisdom of someone that I read, a lady I know, she wrote this. She said, like, how can you expect to love your spouse if you can't love your roommate? And I feel like that I'm convicted by that a lot of like, how am I choosing to love people now? And within the church, am I finding how I can serve, how I can play my part in the church? You know, Shane was talking about worship. You know, how can we plug in with our gifts? Like, where are your gifts? Figure those out and get plugged in, join in, you know?
Yeah, gifts is key so that you're flowing and using things that come naturally to you, and then you will find people intentionally that are like-minded with your gifts, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So then you're on the worship team, and then you make relationships with people who understand what you're thinking about and using your gift at the same time.
Well, and I mean, that's a very good way to phrase it, I think. Like, what can you contribute, I guess, is maybe the question that we all need to ask ourselves at those times to plug in. Like, I mean, if we were supposed to be servants for each other, or, you know, in each other's service, treating each other with love, what does that mean? You know, what do you bring to the table? So, yeah, I mean, for me, the natural fit, having, you know, played music since I was a little kid, you know, that just seemed to be the natural thing that I could contribute, you know, and so I feel that I'm getting something out of it, absolutely. But I think part of it is that I think it's reciprocal. I feel like I'm contributing something while also benefiting.
And I think that's a sign of a healthy soul that you have going on when we've taken time. We've talked extensively about spending time with the Lord and getting to know Him and allowing Him to heal us and for Him to mature us and all these things so that we're becoming healthy adults, healthy parts of the body. And then the natural thing to do is then to start reaching out to others and mentoring or teaching or guiding or just being friends with somebody intentionally. It should not just stay with us, what we've gotten from the Lord in our special season of life, but that it should be something that flows. And I think that when that flow happens, then He is pleased and blessed because He can use what He has built up in us, right? And so all the things that we have gotten from Him are not just for us. They are to be shared with others. So what I do, I've been single for 22 years, and after raising the kids and everything was all done and over with, I immediately launched into educating myself. I started doing a lot of studies, a lot of reading, and sort of built up a little bit of bank of wisdom and knowledge. And what I do now is I make up Bible studies and share them with people, and so it's that flow of giving back. I'm taking in and giving out, and I think it's called breathing, right?
Yeah.
And that's just singleness. We have the freedom, the time to breathe.
Oh, it's a fulfillment of purpose, right? Like there's still purpose without a relationship with another person.
That's right.
So that, as well as a big thing for mental well-being, is to fulfill a purpose.
Yes.
And that's pretty fantastic too. Find your gifting, and then like fulfill a purpose with that.
Absolutely.
I think that's fantastic.
Well, and I mean, that focus on others, I think, is helpful on so many levels. I mean, as I maybe said before, you know, like sometimes, you know, for me, I get lost in my thoughts and focusing on, okay, what I think I want or what I think I need. And life has taught me that usually what I think I want is not actually what I want anyway. You know, that I'm not in charge, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that getting outside. And again, I think that this is a trap that we can all fall into, but we get caught stewing and get caught internalizing everything way too much, and when you actually just put yourself out there, so for me it was, they were saying, okay, well, we need more people for the worship teams, do we have some volunteers? And I went, you know what, sure, I'm going for it. Or whatever the case may be, like that. And again, I know we keep coming back to this opportunity to serve somehow, but I mean that's really what the whole point is, right?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed having this conversation with you people and sharing about being single in the church. Thanks for your time and for your openness. Appreciate that a lot.